London 2012 CO2 emissions. As with the trains, fossil fuel burning trucks were replaced, this time with specialist barges. Delivering construction materials and removing waste by water was the responsibility of Waterways manager Glenn Buckle.
The 350-ton barges bring in 9 container loads or take away 9 container loads of waste each time. That's equivalent to 9 lorry movements off the road for every single movement.
Shipping materials would not have been possible had it not been for a multi-million-pound dredging programme. Lumps of concrete, rusted cars and countless shopping trolleys were all dragged from the murky depths. A new lock was installed to manage the water flow, which opened up the waterways to leisure boats in East London and secured access for freight barges to the Olympic Park. But Glenn had faced difficulties in changing everyone's perceptions of green transport.
One of the biggest challenges on the Olympic Park was persuading contractors to use the waterways. That's a cultural change, something that's not very easy to do. When you have an industry that's whole supply chain of materials, waste, anything involved in construction is road driven. I don't think we succeeded fully, but we are getting there.
Using the canals for construction was only ever a small part of the regeneration plans.
When I first came to the Olympic Park project, I never thought I would actually be standing here looking at barges and working on waterways. To actually see barges come up this river that hasn't seen activity since the 1950s, that will not only be used for construction, but will also be used for legacy and for the people of the area, I think it's terrific.
November 2009, and the Olympic Park's most permanent sustainable venue was growing at an unmatched pace. The Velodrome will host London 2012 cycling events and combine with a velo park for use by the community post-games. Structural engineer Andrew Weir developed its pioneering design.
What we tried to look for is a highly sustainable design for the velodrome, minimising the amount of materials that to be used and to make sure it could be built quickly and easily as possible.
Andrew and his team could have built the velodrome's roof with heavy steel beams, but devised an eco-alternative.
A cable net roof was an extremely efficient way of spanning over this roof. It uses only a third of the steel that will be used if we use steel beams, and also it allows you to get a very dramatic shape into the roof.
The cable net roof would enable fast-track construction. A job that traditionally might take up to a year, reduced to just weeks.
Very nerve-wracking time. We designed this building for millimetre tolerance, and it really was a time of truth.
The floppy cables were assembled on the ground, then connected to the building's stiff edge rim and stretched like the strings of a tennis racket.
The lift took a couple of weeks, but the culmination comes in the last few minutes. When they surveyed the middle of the roof, we were absolutely delighted to find it was within 4 millimetres of our predicted position.
But the velodrome's green aspirations didn't end with the roof's materials. Its shape was also key, only needing to be elevated above the audience.
By pulling the roof down where we didn't need it, minimises the space within the auditorium, which means that you don't have to heat it. It's very efficient.
Wooden panels were lowered onto the cables, forming a solid suspended roof. Transparent panels will flood the arena with daylight, drastically cutting the need for artificial lights.
What I'll take away from here is that sustainability is something, if you get it right at the beginning, can be a real benefit for the project. It did bring home to you that how a sustainable design could have some real benefits in speed of construction.
By April 2010, the velodrome's main structure was complete and on track to become the first venue to open in early 2011. Meanwhile, the Olympic Stadium, the first venue to have started life, was nearing its final phase. Seeing the structure reaching completion was poignant for architect Rod Sheard.
These days you can model a building in a computer almost perfectly. So it's not so much that you don't know what's coming, but there is something a little bit magic about the real flesh and bones of a building. There's still a surprise. There is still something about it that you didn't quite anticipate.
Just 3 years since work had started, the site was unrecognizable. But the London 2012 team still faced their greatest hurdle yet. The iconic venues now needed a setting to match. London 2012's transformation plans for East London depended on creating the biggest parkland attempted in Britain for over a century. This immense challenge was taken on by landscape architect John Hopkins.
It is a chance of a lifetime to work at this scale, to have the money, the responsibility, the deadline, and it's the Olympics that gives us that opportunity and is the power behind it.
John looked for inspiration and found it in Britain's great heritage of parkland design.
Trees are put in. Corridor going across there, yeah.
In the 18th century, Lancelot Capability Brown transformed the world of landscape gardening on an epic scale. London's first purpose-built public park followed in 1845 with the opening of Victoria Park. These green open spaces could be enjoyed by the masses.
We're really developing the historic principles of public park design, extending them into the 21st century. So the difference is about the challenges of sustainable development, sustainable living, climate change.
The Olympic Park design that emerged was pioneering. The southern parkland would feature easy access pathways, sweeping lawns, and festival gardens. To the north, a vast ecological landscape would create rich and diverse habitats, featuring rare wet woodland and winding rivers.
This is really mixing people and wildlife in a way that hasn't been done before. And of course, biodiversity is one of our big challenges worldwide. You know, we are still losing biodiversity at rates that are unacceptable.
The new habitats would have an added bonus.